In this lesson, we will go over the Analyzer tool. The Analyzer module provides the tools to understand the design space of your system through an easy-to-use GUI-style interface. You can introduce trait studies and post-processing capabilities without having to program or script in order to obtain your results. To get us started in this lesson, I've inserted a facility and renamed it Exton, and I've also inserted the default satellite and sensor. I'm going to go into my satellite's properties, and I'm going to change my inclination from 28.5 to 40 degrees. And I'm going to hit apply and OK. The goal of this analysis is to find the longest access duration between the satellite sensor and our facility, which in this case is Exton. The first thing we will do is compute the access between the sensor and our Exton location. We can do that by either going up to Analysis and Access, or we can, from the toolbar, access the Access panel from here. So I'm going to select the Access button, and now I have this new window. I'm going to have my object be my sensor object, and then I'm going to compute access to Exton. I know it's computed when I have a green check mark and the object name has been bolded and there's an asterisk next to it. Now I can take a look at the report. So I can see when my access intervals are and their duration times. The total duration is 172.045 seconds. And now another thing I can do is actually throw my access intervals onto my timeline view. In order to do that, I'm going to go to my timeline view to the Add Time Components button. I'm going to open that. And for my access object, so the object with the key next to it, I'm going to go to Access Intervals. Now I can't insert any of these types of intervals, the first, last, or longest, shortest spans, but since I want to look at everything, I'm going to include the entire access interval and hit apply and OK. I can also take a look at my results on the 2D graphics window by zooming to it, and I can see the trace paths of the orbit as it goes over my Exton location. And so this is showing access from our default satellite. All we've really done is change the inclination of the satellite's orbit. What we'll do now is actually open Analyzer and conduct a trait study to do a more advanced analysis, because we want to optimize our satellite orbit to find the longest total access duration. We can access the Analyzer tool from Analysis, Analyzer, or we can right-click on the toolbar and add the Analyzer toolbar to our window. So I've done that now. So now if I want to access the Analyzer tool, I can hit this button and open up the Analyzer window. Or go over to Analysis, Analyzer, and open up Analyzer from here. So choose one method to open up the Analyzer window. What we need to do now is to define the variables that we will use in our trait study. So we can select any object to take a look at its parameters. We're specifically going to be looking at the satellite, so we're going to select the satellite object from the STK variables list, and underneath STK property variables, we're going to choose the propagator to body. We can expand on that and take a look at all the parameters that are included underneath it, and we're going to actually bring them over to the Analyzer variables list. So we can either select each one individually and bring it over, or we can select the top level propagator to body item and bring everything over. Now we're not going to be varying all of these objects in our analysis, but this is just to show you that you can bring in many variables, but you don't necessarily have to use them in your analysis until you want to. The next thing we'll do is we'll define our result. So we're going to look at access. So I'm going to open up access, and this is our access interval. And we're going to choose from Access Data underneath Data Provider Variables. We're going to open up Access Data. And we want to know how to maximize our total duration. So if I expand duration, I can bring over the sum item, and I'll bring that over to the list. So now I have defined my inputs and my outputs. Now that I've defined my inputs and my outputs, I can actually choose the type of study that I'm going to run. So the trade study I'm going to run is going to be a parametric study. So from the top of the window, from the top of the STK Analyzer window, I'm going to select Parametric Study. And now from this window, I can see all the input variables I've defined and even my output that I'm looking for. So I can drag and drop my design variables and my responses into the right side panel. The first thing I'm going to bring over is going to be the semi-major axis, and I can just select it and drag it to be my input. And now I can define a starting value and an ending value. So I'm going to be changing the semi-major axis to 6,878.14, and this will be in kilometers, and 7,078.14 kilometers. And now I can also define the number of samples and the step size. So my number of samples is 5, so that will update my step size to 50. Now I want to define my response, which is going to be the sum. So I can drag and bring that over. Now that I've set up my study, I can actually run and see my result. Now right now I'm going to just minimize my analyzer window and try to move this to the side so that we can take a look at the results. So now that the run's been complete, I can see what my results are. So now what it's done is it's gone through each of the step sizes that I defined in my parametric study and given me a duration sum. I can open up and examine any of these points and take a look at that value and also its sum. And now if I also wanted to reload these values to my model, I could do that as well. If we wanted to vary more than one variable, we would want to do a carpet plot study. So I'm going to minimize these things. And I'm going to bring back my analyzer window. So using the same input variables and output response that we defined earlier, this time what we're going to do is we're going to run a carpet plot study, and we can just open that. And now here you can see that you can design a trade study with more than one variable. So I'm going to bring in my semi-major axis that I did earlier, and this time I'm also going to bring in the inclination. Now I also need to define my semi-major axis and inclination start and stop points. So here there'll be the from and to points. So I'll do 6,878.14, the same as last time, and 7,078.14. And this time I'm going to do a step size of 5. So a number of steps of 5, and so my step size will be 50. Now I'm also going to define my inclination, and I'm going to have the inclination go between 30 degrees and 60 degrees with a step size of 4. And now for my response, I'm going to once again bring over my sum. And now with that all set up, I'm going to bring this over to the side and have this run as well. So while this is running, I also want you to take a look at the STK window so you can see that as it goes through each of these iterations, it will show it on the screen so that you can look at your results as they're being computed. Looks like the run is done, and now I can take a look at my results here. So here, this is giving me a chart of my data. It's showing me the variables that I've included and even the ones that weren't varied in this analysis. And now to visually look at that, I can look over at a response model and see how the semi-major axis and the sum affected the total duration of the satellite. So now I'm going to use the drag chart to rotate button, and now I can take a look and examine my chart in different ways. We can also take a look at different data visualizers or different plots to show our data in different ways. If we wanted to reload certain results into our analysis, we could look back at the table, and if we selected a certain run that we were interested in, if we right-click, we can look at the design viewer and even load in these results to our model. So then if we go back and open up the carpet plot study, we can see that those results have been updated, and we can sync to STK. And then if we go back to the SDK window, we can see what that result would look like, both visually, we can see it update in the timeline view, and if we also wanted to update the axis report, we could have our updated report there.